Hello, I'm Sean Harry with the Portland Community College Small Business Development Center, and I'm here today talking with two of my colleagues about the challenging topic of closing a business. First, we have Tammy Marquez Oldham, the Director of PCC SBDC. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, Sean. Good morning.
And we have Mike Kelsey, who's one of our lead advisors. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Sean, how are you?
I'm great. We together, Mike and Tammy, have written a guide to business closure, and they are available in both English and Spanish. Some of the businesses we work with here at the Small Business Development Center are finding themselves in challenging and uncertain position due to the economic impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Many are struggling, and some are even considering closing the doors for good. And so as a response to those challenges, Tammy and Mike have put together this guide to business closure to help these businesses plan and implement the next phase of their journey. Now, this video is intended for frontline technical assistance providers, who are supporting small businesses as they consider closing the business. We understand that many of you may feel uncomfortable leaning into this conversation with clients, or maybe just don't even know where to start. And the goal of this video is to introduce you to the guide, to come alongside you in your work, and to provide you with both considerations and steps for small business owners that they'll need to consider in making this decision. So let's start by having each of you give us a quick introduction of yourself and your experience in working with businesses going through the closing process, the decision process for closing. Tammy, let's start with you.
Thank you, Sean. So, as director of the PCC SBDC for 14 years, I reach out and have conversations on a regular basis with small business practitioners like those who are joining us today. And I also hear from small businesses. And what I've been hearing recently, because of the economic crisis created by COVID-19, is great uncertainty about what I should do as a business owner. And as you know, Sean, because you also work at the SBDC, our conversations around what should I do during COVID-19 really take a full spectrum. They are all the way from, I think I want to start a business now, which is a bit surprising, but it's happening quite a lot, to how do I innovate and adapt through adversity? How do I look at exiting from a variety of different ways? And all the way to how do I close a business?
Well, thank you. And Mike, what's your experience with working with people going through a business closure?
I was born into an entrepreneurial family. My parents never worked for anybody else during their whole lives. And until I was about 25, I was involved in the businesses that we had. I grew up on 100 acres of Christmas trees. We had some rental properties, and we also had 3 retail stores, 2 like Dollar Tree and 1 like a Joann's Fabrics. That was my mom's. And so from day one until those businesses were gone, I had direct experience in all kinds of industries, retail and Christmas tree trimming and so on. The closure came when my dad's health started to change in his early 50s. He ended up having to sell the Christmas tree farm that we had because his health prevented him from being able to work there. And he did not want to be there. So he just didn't want to be involved anymore because he couldn't do anything. And then we also had some closure on the others because a few years later, my mom's health started going downhill. And between the retail stores and the rental properties, and I had other things in my mind, for life and what I was going to do outside the family, we decided to close those. So one was both of these were health related, and so I know the feelings that it creates with all of us as far as making those decisions. Obviously, I was a pretty young person when that happened, but my experience with my own family and with other clients that I've dealt with through the SBDC and also just in my own adult life, helping people to close businesses, I would have loved to have had a document like this to provide me with resources and guidance on how to even think about what I was trying to do.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you both have both personal experience in this process, but as well as helping other businesses go through it. Tammy, I have a question for you. Because you have worked with a number of businesses that have gone through this process, what kind of things go on in the mind of a business owner when they're considering closing a business?
Well, I think when you first have this experience of uncertainty, is it time to close my business? How do I know? What kinds of signs and signals would there be? I'm feeling a lot of stress about my business's current financial situation. Is it realistic to imagine that I can pivot right now? Am I able to innovate in such a way that I can keep my business going? Or is it time for me to consider that the life cycle of the business is at its current end, and I need to take a break, and I need to step back, and I need to consider what the future for me and my family might look like. And it may be another business. And it may be time to not be in business for myself any longer, but really enjoyed the experience of working in my business. So these are all the kinds of uncertain aspects of the considerations and steps towards closing the business. Mike and I both use the language closing the business because we recognize that we are not the business. We have responsibility to the business, and we have guardianship of the business, and the business has served our family well and taught us many, many, many things, but we are not the business.
Would you say that there's sort of a typical process that business owner goes through as they think about consider closing a business, or is it a completely unique process for each? How does that work?
So there is a bit of both. There are similar considerations and steps, and then there are unique aspects of the person based on their life and who they are and what their goals and aspirations are. And so being able to recognize that there are both is really important for a small business practitioner as they're meeting the client where they are and having the conversation, which may be imagined as one of the most difficult conversations to have with a small business owner.
Yeah. So do you start with the considerations and then move on to the steps, or do you start with the steps and move on to considerations, or is it a jumble of both? How does that work?
You know, I think that for us, it is about understanding first about where the small business is coming from and why they're considering exiting the business in this way of business closure. So we start with the person, and we have a conversation one-on-one with the person about what are they experiencing. We don't make up an idea that we know. We could not possibly. So we're meeting them where they are. We're participating in solid leadership with them through this decision-making process, but we're listening more than anything else, Sean, we're listening. And from that listening comes an understanding of how to have conversations about the key things that business owners consider and some of the steps that they take if the decision is to close the business. We're also making the assumption that you already know the person. And if you don't know the business owner, then your conversation is going to start in a very different way because you don't have history or relationship. I think the cornerstone of success in having this conversation truly, Sean, is trust built over time. But right now, a small business owner that you're meeting for the first time may not have that.
Right. So you start there.
You start there. You start where you are.
Mike, can you walk us through a typical process that a business owner might need to go through as they're not only considering but making the decision to close a business?
Sure, Sean. Thank you. The decision to close, once that is made by the business owner or owners, depending on if there are multiple owners, the first step that those people would take, that person would take, would be to document, especially in a multiple situation, document the fact that all of the owners agree to close the business. signed and dated, agreed to, and that type of a thing. So, gathering information that you'll need to have to contact the resources that we provide them links for and so on, include the articles of organization, incorporation documents, whatever they might have, and including that agreement to close the business. So that's the beginning of what needs to take place.
And then, I mean, it sounds like you might need to get some legal counsel involved in that. Is that required, or is there advantage to doing it or not doing it?
It is, if strongly recommended that someone in this situation at least consult with legal counsel, and it's an attorney who has some experience in business closure. This is something where you need specific information and details on things to do, things to not do. So as an example, in Oregon, we provide them with the link to the Oregon State Bar Association directory, and you can go online and find attorneys that have experience with this type of activity so that they can do it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a strong you should.
Yes, very strong.
Yeah.
Yes, all caps.
So what other kinds of considerations or steps would they need to go through, Mike?
Well, also in regard, Sean, to the financial counsel, most attorneys that have experience with this will give you, as give the business owner, the information, a checklist of what the attorney needs to see. So you will be able to gather that information because it's something that will save some money, because they ask, you don't have to go search. You've already got those things stacked up and ready to be reviewed by that person. So whether it's financial situation, it could be financial documents, it could be contracts, it could be vendors and supplier agreements. Anything that they have on their checklist to go to the attorney with is something that attorney needs to see. Then we strongly recommend that the business owner or owners get some financial counsel, because there are some things that need to be done very certain ways. This is not my Aunt Ethel's been our bookkeeper for 25 years, so she'll be our financial counsel. This is another strongly should, as far as getting finding a CPA with business closure experience that can help you with the directions on how this needs to be done, so that it protects you in the future as far as like document storage and retention and so on and so forth.
Okay, so they are going to have to keep track of or hold on to documents for a significant amount of time afterwards. So you know how long?
That is correct. Well, the federal government through the IRS indicates roughly 7 years of document retention, and this is personnel records, any other HR records that you have, and obviously financial information, tax statements, and so on. The state of Oregon, if you try to interpret their rulings on how long to retain these documents, it's basically open-ended. So it's really hard to know how to even recommend what people should save. I'm sorry, how long they should save their documents with the state of Oregon. My recommendation was they at least echo and emulate what the IRS is asking for as far as the 7 years. But again, the Oregon statutes don't really give you a specific date when things can be shredded or tossed.
And then, of course, when you're closing a business, you're also talking about letting your employees go, right?
Yes.
So
yes, you
are there any steps in that process that one needs to follow that are specific, or?
Well, specifically, if a company has 99 or more employees, you have to provide 60 days notification of business closure in writing to your employees. But our recommendation is going to be that any size business with any employees, that you provide as much advance notice of closure as possible. There is the group in the state of Oregon, BOLI, Bureau of Labor and Industries, that you need to contact, because it tells you what you need to pay those employees as far as accumulated vacation or a health savings account, the money that needs to go to them plus their pay. And it also tells you when that money needs to be available to your employees. So there are some specific things to do with employees that you need to follow the guidelines both for the state and at the federal level. Absolutely.
What if someone's not in the state of Oregon? Are those similar across states, or do they have their own unique?
Each state, other than in the federal level, each state will have their own state guidelines and requirements for document retention and payback to employees and so on. So, but all of the states are covered by the federal guidelines in regard to closure and to employee pay and letting them go and notification and so on. But each state, just as Oregon does, has their own retention record requirements.
I want to make sure that it is known that closing the business can be an incredibly difficult emotional experience,
Yeah.
and that can't be measured. It can't be known how deep that emotional experience is, and for many, it's going to feel like a very deep sense of loss, of personal loss. For practitioners who have that experience with a client, meeting them where they are with empathy and with understanding is probably the best thing that you can do. You won't be able to know how they feel, but you will know that they are feeling a sense of loss about losing the business. You also have the ability to reach out to Mike Kelsey, to talk with Mike directly about your client. So you are also, as a business development practitioner, Sean, not alone. And I think my hope is that in knowing that you are also not alone, it will give you greater confidence to learn more about the steps to business closure.
Yeah.
The second thing I would add is that a business closure may feel like a personal failure, but at the end of the day, it can be shaped into a new opportunity. And that is the hopefulness of this ability to meet with your client where they are and have the conversation with them. Because yes, you are closing one chapter of a very important aspect of the life of this business, but you have an opportunity to make a decision about what you're going to do next as a business owner.
Mike, do you have any other recommendations about how providers might use the guide to business closure?
I think, Sean, that it is one of the things that we have not discussed yet is that one of the ways to close a business would be through bankruptcy. And so in my world, that's kind of like adding insult to injury. You're closing your business and you're going bankrupt. So it's a 0 for 2 kind of a score, which also brings a strong recommendation of getting legal counsel, obviously, an attorney that's got a successful experience in working with people in bankruptcies. Because a lot of business owners have signed personal guarantees on bank loans for their business. They don't realize that they have personal exposure of their assets and so on. So the part that's on bankruptcy is kind of a reminder to business owners to get legal counsel. And it's also a reminder for you as a service provider and others that do that there's a very specific way to file bankruptcy and do it correctly. There's also some very specific non-negotiables as far as potential personal liabilities, different assets, collateral that they may or may not be able to sell to cover debt and so on and so forth. And the advisors, the professional service advisors, have this page on the bankruptcy filing closure of a business that will guide them and help them to kind of understand the questions that they need to ask.
I want to say on behalf of myself and my colleagues who are, maybe called upon to give advice to businesses that are making these considerations, we really appreciate you writing this guide to business closure. And what it says to me after having this conversation with you is that I'm not alone. There are some steps that we all need to take. The business owner is not alone. I don't need to be too afraid of it because it really is based on relationships. So several things that you have said here today